Welcome back to Shadows of the Past, where we shine our light on the shadows of history. I'm going to start out today's episode with some info that I don't think is going to surprise anyone. Halloween's my favorite holiday. I know, f***ing bomb of truth. It's so rad though. Being able to dress up as the same monsters that we see in the dark of the night. All the eerie ambience and the connections to the spirits visiting the realm of the living. Carving up grotesque faces in a head-like gourd. It's beautiful. It's also the subject of our video today, specifically the Jack-o'-lantern. We'll go over the myth that gave us the origins of this macabre ritual. You'll get to know the drunken loud Stingy Jack and how he trapped the devil, winning himself an eternity of wandering. We'll also go over the further historical ties and talk more on the slow integration of tradition through history and how well the human spirit can adapt. Now come with me and delve into the shadows. This all begins in a land of green and also a land of torrential rain and gray melancholic skies. Rugged crags pierce through its landscape, and dark forests are littered throughout, providing barely enough light to make out your hand. This wild land being Ireland. And possibly while you're strolling through the dense forest, in that inky blackness, you see the glow of a light. Almost like that of a lantern. And as you get closer, you realize it is a lantern, but not one being held by a human, or a living one, at least. There before you is the ghost of a disheveled man, wandering with a hollowed turnip, a spectral flame dancing inside. The fear is too much. You run from the Geist, your screams fading with the glow of the lantern behind you. You just had a chance meeting with Stingy Jack, and how he got there is an interesting story. Jack was not exactly known for being the best guy. If you saw him approaching you, you knew it was bad news. If he wasn't flat out lying to your face, he would relentlessly pressure you until you were overpowered, just like the smell of alcohol wafting from his person. The devil heard about this vile puddle of a human being and had to know if the rumors were true. I mean, could there be someone as coercive as the Great Deceiver? And no shame about it whatsoever. This had to be seen. And so the devil took the form of a lifeless body sprawled across a cobblestone path. Jack would be happening upon this same path. He would see the body, see the face twisted in horrible anguish, and become curious. As he went to check on the corpse, the body would warp and transform into the horned heretic himself. Jack was thinking that this was the end of the road for him. That and he needed some new pants. Luckily, he had an idea. He asked the devil if he could get one last drink. I mean, it's what his reputation was built on. A big part now of why Satan was here. The devil decided that a little bit more vice couldn't hurt before Jack's hapless soul gets dragged to hell. So they hit the local pub. Jack down one drink after another, swimming in a sea of spirits until he was absolutely plastered. The devil decided this had been enough and told Jack to get his tab. Sadly, Jack's pockets were empty. Not a cent to his name. Looks like they were both in a little bit of trouble. But Jack had an idea to get out of it. He told the devil to turn into a silver coin. It would be enough to cover the tab, and when the bartender wasn't paying attention, Satan could turn back and skedaddle out of there. The devil liked the idea. It was pretty deceitful. This Jack guy was really growing on him. So he transformed into a coin, and as soon as he did, Jack picked him up and stuck him in his pocket. And there, also lying in that same pocket, was his secret weapon, a crucifix. If Satan is touching the blessed cross, there was dick all that he was going to do. Jack knew he couldn't keep this up forever and decided to use some leverage to broker a deal. Jack would let the Great Horned One free, but Satan would have to agree to spare his life for another 10 years. The devil didn't have much choice and had to acquiesce. And so Jack turned his life around, becoming a good man of God and learning to help those around him. Just kidding. He continued to lie, drink, and manipulate. starting his cycle where he left off and continuing on for another 10 years. That is, until he found another anguished, lifeless body lying in his path. He went to investigate. You'd think he would have learned by now. The body soon transformed into Satan, who is now gloating at Jack's turn of fortune. Jack told Satan that a deal's a deal, and he was ready to go to hell. But man, he was awfully hungry. I mean, he couldn't go to hell on an empty stomach. There were some apples on the nearby tree, and if Satan could just go grab one of them, it would really hit the spot. The devil, who may have also been heavily drinking, decided this was no problem and soon scrambled up the tree to retrieve an apple. He managed to find a plump one near the top and grabbed it. He went to climb down, but soon stopped in disappointment. As he grabbed the apples, Jack had placed a handful of crosses around the base of the tree, the smirk on his face driving the devil's blood to a hellish boil. And so Jack had one more deal. He'll leave the devil be if Satan agrees to the same. Why he didn't ask this in the first place, I have no idea. I guess Jack didn't really seem blessed with a whole lot of foresight. And of course, with no other choice, the devil agreed. Jack got to drown his liver for many more years until it finally had enough. The years of drinking took its toll and Jack finally kicked the bucket. His soul would float up from his body towards those pearly gates of heaven, a sense of peace and euphoria washing over him as he's lifted higher and higher, until he was stopped. And then God spoke to Jack, his voice filling Jack with warmth and awe, its reverberation shaking his core. But God had saw what Jack had done on earth, a vile man and drunken lout who just wanted to spread malevolence to those around him for his own sake. There'd be no place in heaven for him, and so he was cast down in a clap of thunder like the same fallen angel. The same one that was not going to be happy to see him. Jack could feel it, a cold so freezing that it felt like he was burning. He could hear wails of the damned, and before him rose the great gates of hell, the bones of those same damned wrought into its lattice. But there would be no sanctuary here. No matter how much Jack pleaded to be inside its walls, the devil would not let him have admission. I mean, a deal is a deal, right? But Satan wasn't completely heartless. I mean, Jack had shown him a hell of a time, so he could pay him back in some small way. And so the devil gave him a small ember of hellfire to light his way. Jack would fashion a turnip into a lantern like the highwaymen he once saw on the roads. The ember would be placed inside a hollowed out turnip, providing just a small bit of light. And with the lantern grasped firmly in hand, Jack would start his trek through hell. But that trek would never stop, doomed to wander the lands with no final resting place. No true home at the end of it all. Roaming the world of the living, to continue to play tricks on those unfortunate enough to find the warm lanterns light a treat. But there have been many versions of Jack's tale. The one I told you is just one of the variations. And honestly, I think the most fun. His original tale first appeared in 1836 in the Dublin Penny Journal. In the journal, Jack helps an old man who happens to be an angel. He gets 3 wishes for this and proceeds to make sure that no one can touch his chair, his tools, or his tree. Yeah, Jack was still kind of a dick in this one too. The angel, being obviously disappointed, scolds Jack and tells him he's not getting into heaven. So Satan sends some demons to try and trick him, but he manages to outsmart them. And now Jack is left to roam the earth for all eternity. Hercules Ellis would comprise a tale years later in a poem titled The Romance of Jack-o'-Lantern. By this time, the image of the jack-o'-lantern had been present in Irish society. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary first likens the term to the 17th century in Britain. You'd often call a dude that you didn't know Jack. This eventually evolved to the night watch being called Jack of the Lantern or Jack-o'-lantern. And lanterns weren't usually easy to come by. They were pretty expensive in those days. So many would turn out to hollowing out vegetables, usually turnips, to allow the embers of the candle's light to shine. So you can start to see where all this is coinciding. And it was already a tradition on All Hallows Eve to turn that sad turnip into a glowing garnish. But this story is also here to explain a strange phenomenon that is also connected with this long-established myth. The event known as Ignis Fatuus, or the Will of the Wisp. Strange lights often seen near roads, leading travelers deeper into the swamps, eventually reaching their doom. It actually being swamp gas, or bioluminescent light released from the swamp's mixture of gases produced from all the natural decay. Being people ravaged by wild lands, weather, and invaders, I could see why strange lights in the black of the night in a swamp could lead to some heebie-jeebies. But the sightings of these wisps faded as society gained electricity, and our own lights faded the wisps out of view and our memory. But the jack-o'-lanterns tradition would remain when the Irish brought it over on the boats. But America would not be plentiful with the turnips and potatoes that they would have at home. There would be a different vegetable larger in number and easier to carve and already associated with the harvest season. Pumpkins. Pumpkins had been associated with horror and those unsavory things in the night. Washington Irving's Sleepy Hollow came out in 1820 and had filled Americans' heads with terror of the hellish glow of a pumpkin's eyes. And so all of this works in tandem to give us this much-loved tradition. It also speaks to the adaptability of human nature. Instead of letting a long tradition die as they came over, the Irish chose a vegetable that was not also just easier to come by, but was also already a keystone to America's history. Normally seen as a heretical pagan belief, it now being viewed as a benign and novel harvest tradition aligning with the American values. And obviously it integrated well enough that we're still carving those orange faces today. Now, none of this is for sure, and is more theories from historians to explain these slow societal changes with what evidence they currently have. But hey, it sounds good to me. At least it makes sense in the old think box. And honestly, it makes me wonder what traditions will morph as time marches on. As the internet and easy travel has brought so much more cultural integration into the growing fold, just like how the terror of the pumpkin's light is now a friendly glow, I imagine memory will soften our edges to lead to some unique ways of celebration. And it goes to show that despite our tendency to use these deep stories as words of warning, or deep symbols ingrained representing an entire society, in the end, we're all just looking to escape existence for just a little while, and just have some fun. And speaking of, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for delving into shadows with me today. Goodbye. Pumpkins. 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 Woo-hoo! Pumpkins. 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 Woo-hoo! Pumpkins.